Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to America once again, and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So these guys are yet another relatively new addition to their local beer scene, but they've built a very good reputation of themselves over the last couple of years. From what I understand, they're quite well known for the different kinds of IPAs and their funky and slightly sour beers, but the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style they're not so well known for, but I have heard very good things about this one actually. So yeah, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. It's always cool to try new beers from different parts of America as well, because we seem to get random American breweries over here in Europe in fact. But hopefully this is another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to the state of Georgia in the American Southeast. We're going to go to the city of Savannah, which is on the northern part of the southeastern coast, and we're going to have a look then at my first beer from Tides Brewing, who are from the Starland area in the city. So this particular beer is called Are You Serious? It comes in at 10% ABV, and they're describing this one as an Imperial Stout with pralines. So yeah, sounds pretty good. But this is yet another beer that I picked up at Beer Hive in Amar over in the southern part of Copenhagen. And yeah, the main reason that I got this one was because it was an American brewery that I didn't recognise. I didn't know actually when I asked Jessica to keep this one aside for me that it was from Georgia or even Savannah. I've been in Georgia maybe 2 or 3 times over the years, but not for like 10, 12 years, something like this. So I was far too young to drink at that point in time. But yeah, a beautiful city from what I remember. Very humid though. I remember dying in the heat when I was in Georgia. And that was one of the things, but of course Swedish people are not made for such temperatures like that. But definitely cool to review what I believe is only my second Georgian beer on the channel. The first one, of course, was from Terrapin Brewing Company, who are probably the most recognisable Georgian craft brewery to someone outside of the United States. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about. An Imperial Stout with pralines from Savannah in Georgia, Tides Brewing Company. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website and the link to my future reviews that hopefully I can do from Tides Brewing. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist along with a number of other things, and I'm adding to that whenever I get the opportunity. But like I say, this is only the second beer that I've done on the channel from Georgia, so if you're watching from the state of Georgia, let me know some other breweries and things that I should check out if you get the chance. And I'll also put the link down there to Beer Hive in Amar in Copenhagen as well. Lovely little shop run by Jessica and Nicolina. They've always got a great selection of Danish beers, but every so often you'll find something nice and random like this as well. But I tend to buy my Danish stuff there. But let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about Tides Brewing Company then. So, Tides Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Savannah in Georgia, and the company was founded back in 2018 by Liz and James Massey, who are of course husband and wife. So Liz has a background in marketing and worked as a copywriter, whereas James was an accountant but also an avid homebrewer for over 10 years. But in late 2017 they heard that legislation was about to pass in the city that would allow breweries to sell their own beer by the pint at their tap rooms. So they decided at this point that they wanted to open their own brewery, and they focused on the Starland area of the city for the location, the main reason being that that was where Liz and James had lived as students, and they just kind of fell in love with the district. But unfortunately, the Starland district wasn't actually zoned for breweries, so they went out and did a little bit of a kind of PR campaign. They went out and just talked to local residents, got them to sign a letter of support, and they kind of petitioned the local government, and then things moved from there. So they set up in a 100-year-old house that was built in around 1910, and this was apparently formerly the house of the manager of the dairy plant, which is across the road from the city, and this from the brewery, and this dairy plant was open until the 1980s, and apparently that was quite a big fixture of the Starland district. But they spent a number of months renovating this house, doing much of the work themselves, and the bottom floors of the brewery and the tap room is on the top floor of the house. But the brewery opened officially in April of 2018, originally with just a small 15-gallon pilot kit. However, over the last few years, they've built up the brewery infrastructure and increased the production volume quite dramatically. Unfortunately, I couldn't find an exact figure of how much they're producing each year or whatever. But the labels that you'll find on the beers are designed by Alexandra Hall, who's based in Nashville. I think she actually graduated from quite a famous art school from what it said on the website. But as of June 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced over 450 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And from what I gather, these guys are best known for their different kinds of IPAs, also the more kind of funky beers and the sort of fruity sours, in fact. So to find an Imperial Stout from these guys, I understand, is a little bit rarer, but I can see why they would have imported this style to Europe, because it's one of the ones that's going to travel a little bit better, of course. But yeah, doesn't matter what style we try, as long as it's a good beer, I don't particularly care, and it's always cool to introduce new breweries here on the channel too. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Two Tides Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a wee bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at the beer itself. I'll let you have a wee look at the can art before we open it up, so you can see the little kind of crackery sort of thing on the front of this, just that snapped there. Obviously it's some kind of nutcracker or whatever, but yeah, this is another one. I believe that's the illustration is by Alexandria Hall. I think I said Alexandra earlier on, so maybe, yeah, pronounced that wrong, so my apologies. This can is 1 American pint, which is 473 millilitres. One thing I am going to say about this thing is dense as fuck. This is a very, very heavy can, I have to say. But yeah, you can feel the weight in this thing, which is quite impressive. But yeah, as I say, 10% Imperial Stout, this one with pralines. It doesn't tell you whether it's got oats or wheat or whatever in it, but I'm guessing that it will. They don't seem to have to put the ingredients on beers, on the packaging of beers in America, which is quite interesting. But then again, it can vary from state to state. But here in Sweden, everything has to be labelled with all the ingredients and stuff for celiacs and things. This beer incidentally cost me 65 Swedish kroner. Danish kroner, sorry, not Swedish kroner. This one was bought in Copenhagen, so that is going to translate to roughly 90 or so Swedish kroner, about €9. In that case, about £8 sterling, maybe $10 American, something like that. But for a pint of an American Imperial Stout, you've got the import tax and all of this, I don't think that's too bad, to be honest with you. And 65 Danish kroners is about half an hour's wage or something like that at the minimum rate in Denmark. But yeah, let's get this one out. This is the Are You Serious? A 10% Imperial Stout with pralines from Two Tides Brewing in Savannah in Georgia. Let's get this guy out into the glass and we'll see what it's all about. Let's do this. Ooh, that does look very, very nice. So I think that's enough for the moment to take a look at the beer, and that head is going to fade away very quickly. So yeah, on this side, on my near side if you like, this beer poured with about a half finger of a frothy, very dark tan head, but that of course has faded away very, very quickly, and it's just giving you a nice little bit of a kind of foamy ring around the edge of the glass. You could see that it was a very, very dark tan head there though, but you can see just that little ring around the edge of the glass too, but it looks very, very nice in fact. So in terms of appearance, this beer is exactly what you would expect from an Imperial Stout. I think it's fair to describe this beer as being very kind of dark, sort of ebony rosewood in colour. This is exactly what you'd expect from an Imperial Stout. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect that as well. But yeah, when it comes to black beers like Imperial Stouts, it's very difficult to affect the colour of them with adjuncts and things like this, just because of the presence of black malt. You can do it with like barley wines and stuff like that, but with Imperial Stouts, as I say, very, very difficult. So yeah, not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. One or two big bubbles sitting on the side of the glass there, a few little ones going up toward the surface there, but that surface is completely smooth. There's not a lot going on, but there's a few little bits of sediment just sitting down there on the bottom of the glass too, which looks very, very nice. But yeah, you can see when you sugar this one up in the glass, there's little bits. You can just see how thick this one is. This beer is thick as fuck and dense as fuck, I think is the way to describe that one. I don't think you can really describe it any other way. So you can feel the weight of this in the glass, and that's what we were getting with the can in this one. It's pretty impressive actually. But yeah, nothing else we really need to say about the appearance of this one. It is pretty much what you would expect from an Imperial Stout. So let's have a wee look at the aroma and just see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Really curious about this actually. Oh yeah, it's really nice actually. I'm going to say the aroma of this one is absolutely lovely. It's actually almost, it's kind of interesting, this one. It's almost got a little bit like a minty freshness to it. It's almost like a kind of mint. I did not expect that out of this beer. It has this almost like mint chocolate freshness to it, but when you sugar the beer up, of course, you get more and more of the praline nuts out of it. But when you let it settle, it has this sort of mint chocolate chippy sort of thing to it. Yeah, really interesting smelling beer actually. I think this is one of these beers where you're going to get more complexity out of it when you actually drink it rather than the aroma, but we'll do as we always do and try and break down the aroma a little bit and just describe it for you a bit more in depth. So yeah, the backbone of the beer then, there's a lovely little bit of that kind of there's a lovely little bit of a kind of slightly rye bready, wholemeal, brown bready bread crust in this one. So yeah, that definitely forms the backbone of the beer. But you absolutely have but yeah, so yeah, you've got this kind of almost like rye bready, bread crusty base to this one. There's a little touch of woodiness in there. You have got a little bit of a kind of vanilla type quality mixing within that woodiness, but then above that you get this really sort of cakey type quality out of this one. It's kind of like the edge of a chocolate cake or a chocolate muffin or something like that. And yeah, it's kind of got like this, there's like a sort of sponge cakey note above that. And as I say, for me, I really don't know what it is. But the aroma of this beer, it really reminds me of that flavour that you get from the little chocolate chips in mint chocolate chip ice cream. And the beer, it just has this kind of almost minty freshness to it. This is really unusual, but I think it's really interesting for sure. Yeah. So above that kind of cakey layer, you do of course get some chocolatey notes out of this one. And the chocolate, it's actually kind of almost a phenolic type chocolate that you get out of this. So maybe like 60 or 70% cocoa chocolate, but then you get a more milky chocolate further forward on the nose as well. And as I say, this beer just has a little hint of vanilla for me, but it really has this kind of, the chocolate that you get reminds me of the mint chocolate chip that you get in mint chocolate chip ice cream. That really does. And of course you've got the praline sitting in this one. Praline is, for me, it's always been like a very smooth and slightly more oily type of nut rather than anything else. But when you let the beer settle, you get the praline, but when you sugar the beer up, you certainly get more and more of the dryness from the pralines too, and that goes together really, really nicely, for sure. Yeah, for me, that is really, really nice. On top of that, there's a little bit of brown sugary character to this one, but not too much. You've maybe got a little bit of a slightly leathery brown sugar, a little bit of a toasty brown sugar as well. Sweet caramel in there. A bit more of a treacle molasses kind of thing, a more highly caramelised brown sugar. So yeah, a little bit of roasty, toasty and leathery brown sugar and that kind of treacle molassesy type note coming above it. So, yeah, aroma-wise, I do think this beer goes together pretty damn nicely, so gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. Yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about the malty and yeasty side of things. But yeah, on the hoppy side of the beer, you have got a little bit of green component to this one, but not too much. I mean, we always have to remember that Imperial Stouts are not the most hop-forward of styles. So yeah, you get a nice little bit of kind of earthiness out of this one, but there's quite a wee bit of floral character as well, and some lighter kind of grassiness. So yeah, nice little bit of floral character, nice little bit of grassiness in there, and then yeah, you have you have got that little bit of there's the earthy note in there, as I say, as well. But yeah, obviously, with this being a 10% Imperial Stout, you could age this one a little bit if you really wanted to, and the hoppy character is, of course, going to drop out gradually as time goes on. I've not really had any feedback on whether it's, for me, I don't know if aging these beers in cans works in the same way that the bottles do. I don't know if the kind of layers inside the cans, I don't know if the layers inside the cans really offers the same protection, if you like, as glass would, because glass is obviously quite unreactive. But yeah, that's an interesting point to think about these two. But on the fruity side of things then, just to round off our little look at the aroma, for me, the fruity side of this beer, as I say, this one has quite a little bit of phenolic character to it. Like, it reminds me of the Belgian doubles in a sense. It has this sort of cough syrupy, medicinally type thing. It's almost like you've got a little bit of herbal character within the fruity notes. But for me, there's a little bit of you get quite a lot of plum out of this one, like a kind of dry plum. Definitely a little bit of a drier prune in there as well. You've got that kind of phenolic note, juicier figs, and a little bit of a sharper kind of blackberry as well, actually. But yeah, it does kind of smell quite... This stout for me is quite interesting because it does have a little bit overall of that kind of pastry stout type quality to it. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out when we actually taste the thing. But yeah, the pralines are definitely in there, and you can smell that dominating. But really, I get a lot of that kind of mint chocolate chippy type aroma out of this one, which is really interesting. As I always say though, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I do think it is about time that we have a look at this beer and see what it's all about. So yeah, we'll put a wee bit more in, and then we'll put the rest of it in later on. But yeah, let's have a taste of this one and see what it's all about. So this one is the Are You Serious? 10% Imperial Stout with pralines in it from Tides Brewing in Savannah in Georgia over in the US. Let's get stuck into this. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Ooh. I'm going to say straight away, this is a really, really nice Imperial Stout, this one. It's a really sweet stout, this, actually, I would say that. They just call it an Imperial Stout. They don't say that it's an Imperial Milk Stout or anything like this, but if you were to tell me there's a load of oats in this one, or a bit of lactose, I certainly would believe you. This is a really smooth, creamy, and really sweet-leaning Imperial Stout. I think this is beautifully done, so big thumbs up to Tides Brewing. The praline notes really come out in the aftertaste in this one, which is nice. But it's a very sweet stout other than that, I would say. But yeah, I think this beer goes together really, really nicely, actually. Yeah. Good stuff, and it's interesting because, as I said, this brewery apparently is not so known for their Imperial Stouts. They're known more for their IPAs and their kind of funky type stuff, apparently, but they can certainly do Imperial Stouts if they do more like this. I don't see any problem with it at all. Let's just put the rest of that in there. It's my Sunday afternoon beer this one. So yeah, there we are. But yeah, let's break this beer down then and describe the flavour for you a bit more in depth, as we always do. So we'll start in the middle third of the palate then. So that the middle third of your palate with this beer, you can feel the backbone of this beer. You do get a little bit of that kind of brown bready bread crust there, just forming the backbone of the beer. Further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little touch of kind of woodiness in there. And the interesting thing for me is that just on top of that bread crust, you have like a sort of very slight rye bready type layer. It's almost like a sweet rye bready note. And within the rye bready character, I think that's where the praline note, a good bit of the praline note in this beer actually sits. And you'll find that the further into the aftertaste you go, the more of these kind of oily praline flavours really come out of the beer. Now above the kind of rye bready layer that you get there, you start to get the cakey notes that I was talking about earlier. So you get that kind of sort of cake edge sitting with this one, which is quite interesting. So yeah, lovely kind of smooth cakey edge coming out of the beer. So above that, yeah, so above the kind of cakey edge, as I say, I think chocolate muffin. Yeah, I think a chocolate muffin is probably the best way to kind of describe the sort of cakey flavours that you're getting in this beer. So it's like the kind of edge of the muffin, underneath, and then as you move further up, you get the more kind of fluffy part of the muffin, and you've got this within the kind of muffin flavour, if you like. There's quite a little bit of a sweet kind of brown sugary note, and you've also got some of the nutty kind of praline characters coming out of this one as well. But yeah, I mean, above that, you start to get the kind of chocolatey notes, I would say. So the chocolatey character in this beer is really quite silky, to be honest with you. So and it's a sweeter chocolate for sure as well. So at the back of that middle third of your palate, sorry, at the back, you're getting maybe a sort of 50% cocoa chocolate, and as you come further forward, the chocolate sort of mellows out to be a more 30% milk chocolate type thing. So you can feel the chocolate being a bit darker at the back of that middle third of your palate, and it mellows out and sweetens up the further forward you go. Now above the chocolatey layer, you get the brown sugars, and there's a little bit of a kind of leathery brown sugary character in this one. And one of the things you have to think about with Imperial Stouts, for me at least, because I'm quite interested in the brewing techniques and the chemistry and stuff like this, there's a few things you can do with your Imperial Stout. You can, give it a slightly longer wort boil, and then you get a lot more kind of complexity from the brown sugars. You can also do a double mash, and you get this big sort of sticky mouthfeel from that. This one strikes me as being more reliant on the double mash technique than using the longer wort boil. But that said, you do get a little bit of a slightly leathery brown sugary character sitting above the chocolate, and I think that is quite nice in this one. So yeah, a little bit of that leathery brown sugary character. Above that, you get a kind of oily, sweet caramelly note out of it, and then in the dead centre of your palate, you have a wee bit more of a kind of, you do have a little bit more of a kind of treacle, molasses kind of note coming out of the beer. So yeah, the brown sugary notes in this one for me are really quite interesting. But I do, as I say, the chocolatey side of this beer is interesting too. I do get this little bit of minty kind of freshness out of this beer for some reason, which I do really like. Huge fan of mint chocolate chip ice cream. It's just completely unexpected, to be honest with you. Yeah, really did not expect that from this beer. Doesn't say anything about that. Like I say, I'd be very curious to know the kind of composition of any other adjuncts they put into this beer, because it does just have a wee bit of this minty freshness to it as well. But whatever they've done with this, I think it works very, very well. The only other mint chocolate stout I think I've had was from Hop Hooligans in Romania, and that was a really nice beer as well. But it might well be a bit of an acquired taste for many people. But I think we've covered the middle third of the palate in this beer, which is where the majority of the complexity is. Let's have a little look at the back third of the palate then. So as I've often said in these reviews, for me, the more bitter and darker flavours kind of come out further back on the palate, sweeter flavours come out further forward. But the thing you often find with the back third of your palate is that you get the same flavours coming out as you do on the middle third of the palate, but they just come out in different intensities. So on that border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a slightly more intense and dense kind of chocolate muffiny character in there. But the base of that the base of the beer, you've got that kind of bread crusty note in there. It is a little bit drier. Then you've got that kind of caramelised rye bready note in there, which is a lot more dense and kind of sticky, if you like. Then you get the sort of the edge of the chocolate muffin, and then above that you get the big kind of fluffy side of the muffin as well. So on the back third of the palate, for me, that's a lot more kind of light and airy, and on top of all of that, you can feel a little bit of the kind of the sort of chocolate, like the sort of drier edge and the kind of leathery brown sugars, that just creeps over the top of that back third of the palate and kind of rounds everything off. But above everything else, on the back third of the palate, you get a little touch of the yeasty character coming out of the beer. So let's just have a wee look at that. So yeah, the yeasty side of this beer for me is quite, it has this sort of dense, like, Christmas pudding type vibe to it. I don't know if that's a good descriptor for Americans that are going to watch this video, but it reminds me of the Christmas pudding that my mum always used to make for us, this kind of boozy, oily, sticky, cakey type thing. But then around that sort of dark, dense, cakey note in there, you've got a little bit of a kind of McVitie, you've got a little bit of an almost like honeycomb type flavour. I always get honeycomb on the back third of the palate for some reason, but these are the yeasty notes sitting on top of all the malty characters on the back third of the palate. But definitely, you can feel on the back third of the palate the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, things just condense down and squash together that little bit more. But like I say, it is very, very nice. On the hoppy side of things then, let's move on to that. So, not too much to report in terms of the hoppy side of this beer. In the back corners of the palate, you do have a little bit of earthiness in there. And as you move further forward, it gives you a little touch of herbal character. But as you push further forward toward the front corners of the tongue, you've got a little bit of a floral aromatic note to it. But the green component is nice and kind of oily, but round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more sort of grassy, I would say. But the hoppy character is quite minimal in this beer. The focus on this one should be about the dryness of the bread crust, the more kind of toasty notes, and then also the kind of sweet side of the beer too. But yeah, having a little bit of hoppy character in this one does add a wee bit more depth to it. I'm just curious, you know, the thing that's going through my mind with this beer is this a pastry stout? Would this be considered a pastry stout? Because pastry stout's always been a little bit of a kind of hit or miss style for me, because I don't like that kind of granola. In Europe, a lot of them have this kind of granola type flavour actually, and I've just never been a great fan of that. But you know, as is quite often the case when the Americans get hold of a beer style, it always tends to be a lot sweeter. And if this is an American pastry stout, I think, you know, I'd probably like the American version of the pastry stout a lot more. But to me, if I was to taste this blind, I would think it's a milk stout because of the smoothness and the level of sweetness that you get from this one. But the Americans, of course, do have this sub-style that they call a sweet stout. And yeah, Terrapin, the Terrapin one we had from Georgia, was very much like that too. So maybe in the state of Georgia they like big sweet stouts, so that would make sense. But let me know your own thoughts on that in the comment section below anyway. But yeah, we just finished the green component of the beer. Let's round off the tasting with a look at the front third of your palate. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready kind of build up in there. It's like the chocolate muffiny kind of note in there as well. But then the base of that front third of your palate, a little bit of bread crust, wee touch of the rye bread, and then the kind of more dense, fluffy chocolate muffin. And then above that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just roll the way out of the beer. So let's look at those fruity notes in there. So yeah, on the fruity side of things, what I would say is that at the back, in that border region, between front and middle third of your palate, you do get this sort of phenolic, yeah, you get this kind of phenolic, medicinally type quality in there. You do get a little bit of this kind of minty freshness, but then the fruity esters you get other than that are quite nice too. So we'll have a wee look at that. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer for me, at the back of that front third of your palate, on top, you're getting these lovely, juicy, plummy type notes. Then when you go underneath that, you're starting to get a more kind of, you're starting to get a little bit more of a kind of pruny dryness in there. As you go further down, there's a little touch of date and maybe just a wee bit of sultana at the back of that front third of your palate there. So you get more of the drier fruity characters out of this one the further into the aftertaste that you go. But as you move further forward from that, you'll find the datey sort of sultana type character that kind of spreads forward to the middle of that front third of your palate. Then you've got a more then you've got a little bit more of a kind of juicy figgy note in there. And as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit of black currant underneath and a big oily blackberry just sitting on top of that. So yeah, the way it goes together in that respect is very, very nice. The fruity character I think is really good. So yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff, this one. Really nice. I mean, I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour of this beer, but this is very nice. I wasn't sure what to expect from this one, to be honest with you, but I think it's a really nice beer. They're not well known for their Imperial Stouts, apparently, but I'm certainly quite happy with this. I'm going to enjoy sipping on this for the next hour or two. But yeah, cool to sit down with this one and try something from a new brewery, especially from Georgia, which we haven't really covered on the channel so far. But yeah, lovely beer, this one, I have to say. Let's round off then with the mouthfeel. For me, this beer is it's full-bodied, it's in the mid-range of full-bodied. It's one of the thicker American Imperial Stouts I've had. Like I'd often said on the channel before, I often found that the Scandinavian, the Nordic Imperial Stouts were very difficult to beat on their mouthfeel, but a number of the American ones I've tried in recent times would make me think differently. But still, yeah, mid-range of the full-bodied part of the spectrum for me. Smooth carbonation, very sort of silky mouthfeel, and often maybe quite creamy. I do wonder if there's a bit of lactose in this beer, as I said earlier. But the malt, like we said, there's a little bit of dryness underneath. There's a nice little bit of smoothness and density in this one. Quite a bit of sweetness in the beer as well. Quite a dry sweetness, but lots of chocolate. A little bit of a minty freshness as well. In terms of IBUs, I mean, this beer is going to be about 10 IBUs or something like that. Very, very low in terms of its bitterness. And you've also got some really lovely fruity characters as well. Yeah, just big oily fruity notes, red fruity notes, and a little bit of dry fruity character coming out of this one too. But lovely beer, can't fault it at all. I'd just be very curious to know what exact sub-style Two Tides consider this one to be, because for me, if I was guessing, like I say, American sweet stout, but they might call it a pastry stout, I really don't know. But whatever it is, really like this one, so big thumbs up to Two Tides Brewing. So yeah, this one was the Are You Serious? A 10% Imperial Stout with pralines from Two Tides Brewing in Savannah, Georgia, over in the southeastern US. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Tides Brewing. If you're watching from the state of Georgia, do give me some other brewery recommendations, because I'd love to have a look at a few more things from there. And it's always cool to learn more about the different American breweries, because we get random stuff over here in Europe from different states all the time. But yeah, really cool to review this one. So thank you again for watching my reviews. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Check out my social media, check out the brewery's social media, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Slàinte, skål, cheers, see you later.